Hey kids. So one of the most dangerous things social media has done to politics is convince people that loyalty is the same thing as morality. And nowhere is that clearer than what just happened to Thomas Massie. Because the thing is, Massie was not some liberal resistance fighter. He was not some progressive activist secretly infiltrating conservatism like a Hallmark movie about democracy. He was a Republican congressman with a long conservative voting record who aligned with Trump on most issues. But the second he publicly diverged from the narrative on issues like executive authority and the Epstein files, he became politically radioactive. And I think that reveals something much bigger about modern political identity. We increasingly do not reward ideological consistency. We reward emotional obedience. And those things are not the same. One of the hardest things for people to accept is that politics is no longer primarily functioning as policy analysis for many Americans, which it did at one point. It's functioning as identity, belonging, community, moral positioning. And honestly, humans have always done this. We are tribal creatures. We build groups, we protect groups, we emotionally attach to groups. The problem starts when criticism of the group begins to feel psychologically identical to criticism of the self. And you can see this on any social media post. Because once that happens, facts become threatening, not because they're false, but because they are emotionally destabilizing. And this is where social media just makes everything worse. Platforms reward emotional certainty. Nuance performs terribly. Careful analysis performs terribly. But outrage? Now outrage moves at the speed of Wi-Fi. What fascinates me psychologically is that groups are often more threatened by internal dissent than external opposition, because outsiders are expected to disagree. Insiders question the narrative. When they do that, they create instability. And every political movement in history eventually struggles with this. Royal courts punished disloyalty. Religious movements punished heresy. Revolutionary governments punished ideological impurity. McCarthyism punished perceived deviation. And we see what's happening to Marjorie Taylor Greene. None of this is new. What's new is the technology. The psychology is ancient. And social media intensifies this because loyalty is now publicly performative. You're constantly signaling things like who you support, who you hate, what narrative you belong to, what tribe you emotionally inhabit, which means disagreement is no longer just disagreement, it's betrayal. And honestly, modern politics increasingly behaves less like governance and more like a fandom. And I do not mean that as an insult to fandom culture, although that has its own issues, and I'll address those. I mean structurally, because fandom is emotionally immersive. Fans protect the narrative. Fans rationalize contradictions. Fans defend behavior they would condemn in someone else. Fans experience criticism of the central figure as criticism of themselves. Hello, Swifties. And once politics enters the emotional strategy, everything becomes difficult, because now the question is no longer, is this true? The question becomes, does this threaten my identity? And those are radically different questions. I think one of the reasons people struggle to change political beliefs is because changing your mind is emotionally expensive. It requires admitting uncertainty, tolerating discomfort, acknowledging you may have defended something harmful, risking social belonging. And all that's difficult. I mean, we have to be honest about that, especially online, because social media has transformed opinion into performance. Everyone is building an identity publicly in real time. And once people perform certainty long enough, uncertainty starts to feel humiliating. So instead of reconsidering, many people just double down. Not because they're stupid, because psychologically doubling down can feel safer than destabilization. And that's how movements become increasingly extreme over time. Not always because people become more ideological, but because social pressure punishes moderation. So the Thomas Massie situation is not really just about Thomas Massie. It's about what happens when loyalty to a person becomes more important than loyalty to a principle. Because once that shift happens, truth becomes conditional, and systems built on emotional obedience become fragile. Not strong, fragile. Because fragile systems punish honesty. They punish questioning. They punish complexity. And history is fairly clear about what eventually happens to systems that cannot tolerate internal criticism. They rot. Not all at once. Slowly, emotionally, defensively, until reality eventually forces the conversation they were trying to avoid. And honestly, that may be the most human pattern in history.